My name is Lena Morrison, and the first thing I noticed when I woke up was the smell. Sharp, clean, chemical, like something trying too hard to erase what had happened before. The hospital room was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. White walls, white sheets, white lights buzzing softly above me, as if they were whispering secrets I wasn't allowed to hear. My mouth felt dry, my head heavy, my body unfamiliar, like I'd been borrowed and returned slightly damaged. A nurse stood near the window, flipping through a clipboard. She smiled when she saw my eyes open. "Welcome back, Lena," she said gently. "You gave us quite a scare." I tried to speak, but my throat burned. She noticed and handed me a cup of water, holding the straw steady while I drank like a child who'd forgotten how. "How long?" I asked finally. She hesitated. "Just a second." "Long enough." 3 days, she said. "You've been here for 3 days. 3 days. Time doesn't work the same when you're sedated. It stretches and collapses, folds in on itself. I could have sworn it had only been 1 night. Maybe 2. But 3 days meant something else. 3 days meant people had time to notice, to worry, to come. They told me I'd experienced what they called an acute psychological breakdown. I remember nodding like that term belonged to someone else. Something clinical, something distant. But the truth was much simpler than the words they used. I had finally stopped holding everything together. Before the hospital, before the silence, before the 4 lines and locked doors, I had been living on autopilot. I'd moved back in with my family temporarily. That's what we all called it. Temporary help, temporary support, temporary sacrifice. In reality, I became the solution to every problem they didn't want to deal with. My mother's migraines, my sister's childcare gaps, my father's endless list of things around the house that were too expensive to hire someone for. I cooked, cleaned, drove, fixed, organized, smoothed over arguments, absorbed stress that wasn't mine. And I told myself the same lie every night. This is what being needed feels like. This is what love costs. The breakdown didn't come all at once. It never does. It arrived quietly, disguised as exhaustion, as forgetfulness, as nights where sleep refused to come no matter how still I lay. My thoughts became louder than my body, racing until my chest hurt and my hands shook for no clear reason. The night everything collapsed, I remember sitting on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub, staring at the door like it was an enemy. My phone was in my hand. I didn't know who I was calling. I just knew I couldn't stay alone with my thoughts anymore. When the paramedics arrived, someone must have called them. I don't remember who. I remember bright red lights flashing against the walls. I remember a man asking me my name over and over like he was afraid I'd forget it. Then nothing. Back in the hospital room, the nurse adjusted my blanket and said, "Your family knows you're here." The words landed heavy in my chest. "Have they?" I started, then stopped. I didn't want to sound desperate. I didn't want to sound like someone who needed to be chosen. "They've been notified," she said carefully. "Visiting hours start at noon." Noon. I stared at the clock on the wall. 9:17 a.m. 3 hours felt manageable, reasonable. People had jobs, responsibilities, lives. I told myself that. I smiled and thanked her, pretending my heart wasn't already preparing itself for disappointment. Later that afternoon, they let me have my phone. My hands shook as soon as it was placed in my palm. Not from weakness, but from fear, from hope, from everything tangled together. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening my messages. I typed the same thing to everyone. "I'm in the hospital. I'm okay, but please come visit. I really need to see someone familiar." I sent it to my mom, my dad, my sister, Claire, even my cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in months. The message looked small once it was sent, fragile, like something that could be ignored too easily. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. I watched the hallway through the small window in my door, every set of footsteps making my heart jump. Every laugh, every voice that wasn't mine chipped away at something inside me. Nurses passed, doctors passed. Other patients were wheeled by with visitors trailing behind them, flowers in hand, voices low, faces concerned. No one came for me. By evening, my phone was still silent. The nurse came back to check my vitals and hesitated when she saw my face. "Sometimes families get overwhelmed," she said softly, as if offering an excuse I hadn't asked for. They usually come within the first day. I smiled. Again. I had gotten very good at that. They're just busy, I said. They'll come tomorrow. That night, alone under fluorescent lights that never truly dimmed, I realized something terrifying. I had spent my whole life showing up for people who didn't know how to show up for me. And this was morning came without ceremony. No footsteps at my door. No familiar voice saying my name. Just the soft beep of machines and the pale gray light slipping through the blinds like it was unsure whether it was welcome. I woke before the nurses did their rounds and lay there staring at the ceiling, tracing the tiny crack that ran from one corner to the other. It looked like a fault line, the kind you don't notice until the whole structure is already compromised. I wondered how long it had been there. How long things can break quietly before anyone pays attention. My phone sat on the tray table beside my bed. Still nothing. I told myself not to check again. I checked anyway. No replies. No missed calls. Not even a heart reaction or a scene indicator. The part that hurt most wasn't that no one came. It was that no one even asked how I was doing. Around noon, visiting hours officially began. The hallway outside my room grew louder. Laughter drifted in. Someone argued softly over a vending machine. I heard a woman crying somewhere down the corridor, the sound wrapped in another woman's arms. I pulled my blanket tighter around myself and waited. Every time footsteps slowed near my door, my chest tightened. Every time they passed, something loosened inside me, like my body was slowly learning not to expect anything anymore. By mid-afternoon, the nurse I'd met the day before stopped by again. Her name tag said Rosa. "You haven't had any visitors yet?" she asked gently, already knowing the answer. I shook my head. She frowned just slightly, not judgmental. Protective. "Do you want me to call someone for you?" The question almost broke me. "No," I said too quickly. Then softer. "I already did." She didn't push, just nodded and adjusted my fore. Before leaving, she placed a small cup of applesauce on my tray and said, "I'll check on you later." That simple sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Later, scrolling aimlessly, I made the mistake of opening social media. There they were. My family. Smiling. My mother stood by the kitchen island holding a plate of food, mid-laugh. My father leaned against the counter, drink in hand. Claire sat on a stool, her arm around her husband's shoulders, grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Nothing like a quiet night at home, Redheart." I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. They knew where I was. They knew why I was there. And they were home, comfortable, together. Something cold slid into place inside my chest. I didn't cry. Not then. Crying felt too generous, like giving them proof that they still mattered more than they did. The doctor came in later that evening and explained my treatment plan. Therapy sessions, medication adjustments, observation. He spoke kindly, professionally, like someone who saw me as a person instead of a problem. "You're not weak for needing help," he said. "You carried too much for too long." The words landed harder than he probably realized. That night, I slept for a few hours without dreaming. When I woke up, the silence felt heavier but clearer, less shocking, more instructional. By the third day, the hope had thinned into something brittle. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I started noticing things instead. The way the light shifted across the floor, the rhythm of a hospital at night, the way Rosa always squeezed my shoulder before leaving my room like she was grounding me to the moment. On the fourth day, I finally received a message. From Claire. "You okay?" 2 words. No question mark of urgency. No acknowledgement of where I was. No apology. I stared at it for a long time. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. "I asked you to visit." 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. No reply. Later that same day, another message came through. From my dad. "Call me when you get a chance." Not "Are you okay?" Not "We're sorry." Just an instruction. For the first time since I'd been admitted, something in me hardened. I didn't reply. That evening, I watched another patient down the hall get discharged. Her family surrounded her, carrying bags, laughing softly, arguing about where to eat afterward. She looked tired but loved. I felt invisible. But invisibility does strange things to you. It either erases you, or it frees you. That night, Rosa sat with me longer than usual. She told me she'd worked in psych care for 12 years. That she'd seen people come undone for far less than what I'd carried. Sometimes, she said quietly, the breakdown isn't the problem. It's the body finally saying no. I thought about my family. About how often I'd said yes. To everything. For everyone. When discharge day came, no one came for me. I walked out of the hospital alone, holding a paper bag with prescriptions and a folded pamphlet about support systems. The irony almost made me laugh. Outside, the air felt sharper. Real. Honest. My phone buzzed. 3 missed calls. 2 from my dad. 1 from my mom. A new message followed. We didn't know how serious it was. I stood there on the sidewalk, sunlight warming my face, and felt something shift permanently. They had known. They just hadn't needed me while I was broken. And I knew, deep down, this silence wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. One I was finally starting to see. Going back to my apartment felt like stepping into a life I'd paused without permission. The air was stale, like the rooms had been holding their breath while I was gone. Mail spilled out of a slot near the door. A thin layer of dust coated the coffee table. Nothing was broken. Nothing was urgent. And yet, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence beneath the noise. It felt unfamiliar. Not lonely, just unused. The first message came from my mom. We're glad you're home. Call when you can. Glad. Home. As if I'd been on vacation. An hour later, my dad texted. The sink in the upstairs bathroom is leaking again. You remember what you did last time. I stared at the screen, waiting for the rest of the message. For the part where he asked how I was feeling. Or if the doctor said anything important. Or if I needed help. Nothing else came. That was when it clicked. They hadn't ignored me because they didn't care. They ignored me because I wasn't useful from a hospital bed. I didn't respond. The next day, I slept for almost 12 hours straight. Real sleep. The kind that doesn't come with panic attacks or racing thoughts. When I woke up, sunlight filled the room, soft and unhurried. I made coffee and drank it on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city move without me. For the first time in years, no one needed anything. And that scared me almost as much as it comforted me. By day 3, the messages changed tone. Hey, just checking in, Claire wrote. Then an hour later, the garage door is acting weird again. I laughed. Out loud. A sharp, surprised sound that startled even me. I still didn't answer. The silence stretched, thickened, became deliberate. On the 4th day, I posted a photo. Nothing dramatic. Just my coffee mug on the balcony railing, the sky a soft blue behind it. Caption. Peace feels better than obligation. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't explain. It wasn't for them. But of course, they saw it. 40 minutes later, Claire messaged. Must be nice ignoring everyone while we're dealing with real problems. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For years, I would have apologized, explained, offered to come over, fixed whatever was broken just to keep the peace. This time, I typed one sentence. You mean like when I was in the hospital and no one came? She read it immediately. No reply. That silence felt different. Not heavy. Not painful. Powerful. The call started after that. Dad. Mom. Dad again. I let them ring. Watched the screen light up and fade. Each missed call felt like another thread loosening, another invisible rope slipping off my chest. That night, I slept with my phone in the other room. When I woke up, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to them right away. I made breakfast instead. Eggs. Toast. Ate slowly. Intentionally. Like someone who had nowhere else to be. When I finally pressed play, Dad's voice filled the room. Sarah! He caught himself, then corrected Lena. We don't understand why you're acting like this. Acting. Another voicemail followed. We're family, Mom said. You can't just disappear when things get hard. I deleted them both. Because things hadn't gotten hard for them. They'd gotten inconvenient. By the end of the week, I felt different in my body. Lighter. Like I'd set something down I didn't realize I was carrying. I cleaned my apartment, not out of obligation, but because I wanted my space to feel like mine again. I reorganized drawers. Threw out things I didn't need. Old receipts. Old guilt. Then, late Friday evening, my phone rang again. Dad. I answered this time. What is going on with you? He demanded, skipping any pretense of concern. We raised you better than this. I leaned against the counter, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. You raised me to fix things, I said quietly. Not to be okay. There was a pause. That's not fair, he snapped. Isn't it? I asked. I was in the hospital, Dad. I asked you to visit. You didn't sound that bad, he said. We thought you bounced back. You always do. The words landed like a confession. They hadn't come because they believed I was unbreakable. And unbreakable people don't get care. They get used. I'm not fixing anything anymore, I said. Not the house. Not the problems. Not this. He scoffed. So you're punishing us now? No, I said, and surprised myself with how calm I sounded. I'm choosing myself. I hung up before he could respond. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. I felt steady. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something that would change everything. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because things were starting to fall apart again. And for the first time in my life, I decided to let them. Saturday morning, there was a knock on my door. Not a polite one. Not hesitant. The kind that assumed I'd open it. I froze mid-step, coffee mug in my hand. My heart didn't race, but my stomach tightened, like my body recognized a pattern before my mind could catch up. Another knock. Louder. Lena, my mom called. We know you're home. Of course they did. They always knew when they needed me. I stood there for a full 10 seconds, staring at the door. A week ago, I would have rushed over, apologized for not answering, hugged her like I was the problem that needed fixing. Instead, I set my mug down and opened the door. My parents stood in the hallway like they'd rehearsed concern in the car. Mom's arms were crossed tight against her chest. Dad's jaw was clenched, his keys still in his hand, like he hadn't planned on staying long. We were worried, Mom said immediately. I looked at them. Really looked. Neither of them asked how I was. You didn't come when I asked, I said calmly. But now you're here. Dad sighed like I'd exhausted him already. We didn't realize it was that serious. I stepped aside and let them in. The apartment felt smaller with them inside. Their energy filled the space, critical, restless, searching for something to correct. Mom glanced around. You reorganized? Yes. Why? I almost smiled. We sat at the table. The same table where I'd once paid their bills online while they argued about paint colors. The same chair where I'd answered work emails at midnight so I could help them the next day. Mom finally spoke. Your aunt said you're being distant. Distant. Not hurt. Not overwhelmed. Not recovering. Distant. I was hospitalized, I said. I had a breakdown. Dad leaned back. Everyone gets stressed. That sentence cracked something open in me. This wasn't stress, I said. This was years of being the strong one. The reliable one. The one who never said no. Mom frowned. So what? Now you're blaming us. I nodded slowly. Yes, a little. Her eyes widened. After everything we've done for you? There it was. The ledger. The debt. I took a breath. My therapist's voice echoed in my head. You're allowed to speak even if it makes others uncomfortable. I asked for one thing, I said. Just one. To come visit me. To sit with me when I couldn't stop crying. Silence. Dad looked away first. Mom's voice softened, but it wasn't tenderness. It was damage control. We didn't think you needed us like that. That's the problem, I said. You never do. Her lips parted, then pressed together. Do you know what it feels like? I continued. To realize the people who raised you only show up when they need something fixed? Dad stood up. This is unfair. I stayed seated. You're right. It is. But it's also true. Mom's eyes glistened, not with empathy, but with frustration. So what do you want from us now? The old answer rose automatically. Understanding. An apology. Change. But I didn't say any of it. I don't want anything, I said. That's new for me too. They stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Dad grabbed his jacket. If this is how you're going to be, then fine. But don't expect us to beg. I nodded. I won't. They left without hugging me, without saying they loved me. The door closed behind them with a soft, final click. I stood there for a moment, waiting for the guilt to rush in. It didn't. What came instead was grief. Not for them, but for the version of me who thought love had to be earned through usefulness. I slid down against the door and cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something old finally leaving my body. That evening, I received a text from my mom. We're hurt. We hope you'll come around. I read it once. Then I turned my phone off. The next few days were strange. Peaceful. Unfamiliar. I went to therapy. I walked without headphones. I started writing again, pages and pages of thoughts I'd never said out loud. And slowly I noticed something terrifying. Without me fixing things, they were unraveling. The garage door broke completely. The sink flooded. Claire called twice. I didn't answer. For the first time, their chaos wasn't my emergency. And that's when I realized. They didn't lose me when I stopped helping. They lost control. The week after my parents came to the apartment, the quiet stayed, thick and solid, like a wall I'd built around myself. I didn't answer calls. I didn't check messages. I even ignored the delivery from the grocery store I'd ordered for myself, just to test how far I could extend this new boundary. And then it happened. The first real crisis. Dad called me at 7:03 a.m. sharp. Sarah, the water heater's burst. The basement's flooding. What are you going to do? I sat on the couch, holding my mug like a shield. For the first time, the panic I'd trained myself to feel simply didn't come. I'm not coming, I said softly, almost to myself. He laughed. A short, incredulous laugh. You can't be serious. I am, I said. It's your house, not mine. The line went silent for a moment, then the slam of the receiver. And something in me shifted. All my life, I'd tied my value to their needs. If something broke, I fixed it. If a fight erupted, I mediated. If they were tired or lazy or careless, I bore the weight. And now nothing. I didn't rush. I didn't apologize. I didn't even feel guilty. I started keeping track of their calls, voicemails, texts. Every attempt to pull me back. Every single one went unanswered. The house was falling apart again. The gutters leaked. The roof sagged. The ceiling in the laundry room bowed more each day. And for the first time, they had a face at themselves. I watched the pattern emerge. The chaos had always existed. I had just held it together with my own hands. Without me, it was raw, messy and impossible. And I realized something quietly revolutionary. I could let it fall apart. I didn't answer when Claire texted next. The garage door's broken. Can you come fix it? No. When my mom called about bills, I didn't answer. When Dad left a voicemail about the water heater flooding again, I deleted it. I was free. And I was terrified, because freedom was loud. It demanded attention I wasn't used to giving myself. I had to learn how to breathe without waiting for permission. Eat without guilt. Sleep without checking my phone every hour. One morning, I brewed coffee, sat on my balcony, and watched a delivery truck struggle with my parents' mailbox across the street. The garage door stuck, water pooled by the curb. And I laughed. Not mockingly. Not cruelly. Just clearly. It was poetic justice. Not revenge. Just balance. I started rebuilding my life on my terms. I signed up for that freelance project I'd been offered months ago, the one I'd postponed to help them. I painted. I wrote. I met David for coffee on quiet afternoons. Each choice was deliberate. Each moment reclaimed. Then the call came. Not a text. Not a message. A phone call. Dad. My stomach sank slightly, the old reflex kicking in. But I didn't answer. I didn't even look at the screen. I watched it ring, and finally go to voicemail. When I listened, he sounded worn, almost humbled. Sarah, we need help. We can't do this ourselves. Please. It was different this time. Not anger. Not entitlement. Desperation. I held the phone for a long time. Every instinct screamed at me to drop everything, run over, fix it. I didn't. Instead, I sent a single text. You have to handle it yourselves. No explanation. No apology. No lecture. Then I put the phone down. And I felt lighter than I had in years. The flood continued. The roof sagged further. The house that had once been my life's work, and my chains, was theirs to bear. And I didn't flinch. I didn't watch. I didn't wait. I didn't answer. I started receiving updates anyway, through neighbors, mutual friends, even Aunt Sharon calling to check. The water heater finally broke the wall. The laundry ceiling collapsed. They don't know what to do. And for the first time, I felt no responsibility. because their chaos had never been mine to fix. That night, David stopped by. He didn't ask about my parents. He didn't pry. He simply poured tea into 2 mugs, handed me one, and sat quietly. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence was companionship. Not duty. Not expectation. Just presence. And that's when I realized the most important thing. I could be loved. Not because I fixed problems. Not because I was strong. Not because I was convenient. Just because I existed. And it felt revolutionary. Morning light spilled across my apartment like a quiet revelation. The city outside stirred, indifferent to the chaos I had left behind. I brewed coffee and carried it to my balcony, letting the warmth seep into my hands. For the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for my phone. No notifications, no urgent calls, no desperate voicemails. Just silence. Silence that belonged entirely to me. I realized how long I had been waiting for permission to exist without obligation. How long I had been conditioning myself to measure my worth in repairs, in labor, in how indispensable I could be to people who never considered my own fragility. The hospital, the breakdown, the week of avoidance, all of it had been a teacher. And for the first time, I felt I had passed the lesson. I started small. I cooked my own breakfast, brewed another cup of coffee, and actually tasted it. I watered the plants I had neglected for months. I sat in the sun with my journal open, writing without restraint, without guilt, without the constant need to justify every word. Words had always been my escape, but now they were my liberation. I wrote about the breakdown, the hospital, the emptiness, and finally, about the people who had left me to be invisible until I was needed again. Days passed. My parents called sporadically. Each time I ignored them. They left voicemails, some panicked, some frustrated. A couple sounded almost like they were apologizing, but the apology was always buried beneath their need, their demands, their insistence that I fix what they had allowed to rot for years. I deleted them. Every single one. It wasn't cruelty. It was necessary. Boundaries, I realized, were not punishments. They were declarations. They were a way to protect what had survived inside me when everything else had tried to break me. Then came the text from Emily. Short, clipped, like she was testing the waters. You're being dramatic. The ceiling's collapsing. We need you. And yet, nothing broke through my resolve. I didn't respond. I allowed the tension to exist outside of me. For the first time, the responsibility of their lives was no longer mine to carry. I spent evenings alone, rediscovering the rhythm of my own breath. I took long walks, listened to music without headphones, cooked meals just for pleasure, and slept through nights without waking to check messages or anticipate crises. Life, my life, was reclaiming itself from the weight of expectation. Then, unexpectedly, Dad called again. I didn't answer. Hours later, a single voicemail came through. His voice, older, wearier, carried something different this time. Not entitlement, not frustration. Fatigue, regret, and a strange humility. Sarah, we can't manage. We need to talk. Please, can we come see you? I held the phone in my hand and didn't immediately respond. I stared at it as if it were a foreign object. And then, carefully, deliberately, I let myself acknowledge what had changed inside me. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something I hadn't known I could feel, readiness. I texted back, neutral place. One conversation. No obligations. Saturday arrived. I dressed simply, comfortably, and drove to the diner we had all frequented in the past. The same sticky booths, the same burnt coffee aroma, but now it felt different. I felt different. When I saw them seated there, Mom looking frail and anxious, Dad rigid, Emily scrolling through her phone, I took a deep breath and walked in. No rehearsed apology, no explanation, just presence. They looked up, startled by my calm. I'm here, I said. Dad cleared his throat. We didn't handle things well, he admitted quietly. Your mom's sick. The test, it's bad. I nodded. I know, I said softly. I've known for weeks. Mom's eyes filled with something I hadn't expected. Regret, perhaps, but also recognition. Emily looked up, and for the first time, her expression softened. We talked, not about blame, but about reality, about limits, about the fact that love wasn't measured by utility or availability, but by presence, honesty, and respect. No one asked me to fix anything. No one demanded my labor or my forgiveness. It was simple. When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt complete. I had finally separated my identity from the needs of people who had always relied on my strength, but never my humanity. I walked to my car and felt the crisp air fill my lungs. The world outside was indifferent, yet perfectly in harmony with the peace I had cultivated inside. Back at my apartment, I sat on the balcony and watched the city lights shimmer like tiny promises. David called around 9. "How did it go?" he asked. "Peaceful," I said. "You sound like someone who stopped bleeding," he replied softly. I smiled. Maybe I had. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Healing isn't about mending what broke. It's about knowing which pieces were never yours to fix." And as I closed the notebook, I realized I wasn't waiting for someone to call. I wasn't waiting for someone to need me. I wasn't waiting for the house to fall apart or the next crisis to arrive. I was simply living, fully, quietly, and entirely on my own terms. The silence that once haunted me now felt like freedom. Endless, steady and mine. Finally, I understood. Peace doesn't come from being needed. It comes from needing nothing from those who once demanded everything. I leaned back, inhaled deeply, and let the city carry on without me. And for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was present, not for anyone else, for me.